Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Can I say what a great privilege it is to be able to address you once again here at Agribusiness. Now, those of you who are aficionados of this event will often hear me talking about political lobbying. And I will be addressing that later in this talk. But also from the feedback forms over the last couple of years, people have said, we'd really like to know a bit more about what AIC actually does within the individual sectors. So within the topic of threats and opportunities, I thought I would pull some of the examples out for you to see in what is known at the office across the showground as the day job. First thing to say is that there are always lots and lots of issues on our desks at any one time. Typically over 100. Some of them are solved within a matter of hours, some days, some weeks, some years, and if it's GM, in the career lifetime. And so I'm going to pull some examples out from the sectors individually. And for those of you who are not familiar with the structure, these are the sectors within AIC, and I shall talk about AIC services separately. So let's start with the feed sector. I talked last year about the Feed Advisor Register, and I think it's fair to say that this has been an incredibly successful undertaking for us. Not only do we have just under 1,200 people on the Feed Advisor Register, but since its inception, the quality of the qualification and the validity of Feed Advisor Register has continued to rise. We always said that we wanted to do that, and we are fulfilling that particular promise. The next subject to talk about is medicated feed. This obviously is a massive issue for the livestock industry, but also you can hardly open a newspaper or watch a TV report nowadays without being aware of the huge concern about the use of antibiotics. And of course, we've been in great discussion about this topic at national and European level. It's complicated slightly by the fact that the feed industry in different EU countries take radically different stances on medicated feed. And I think it's fair to say at the moment that the outcome is in some considerable doubt. What's not in doubt, however, is that there is a great story to tell in terms of former foodstuffs. And the AIC affiliate, which is the UK Former Foodstuffs Processors Association, the members are now handling in excess of 700,000 tonnes of former foodstuffs every year, which is going back into becoming a very important, very valuable feed ingredient. And those of you who saw Hugh Fearnley-Whitting's stall on the TV 10 days or so ago will realise that this is very much a live topic, and a topic for which we have something really to be very proud about. Gosh, this is a tough subject, and of course the speaker that follows today will do a much better job than I can about talking about this whole issue about sustainability of soya. Again, it's a massively high-profile political issue, and there's incredible demand from food companies and retailers to get towards sustainable soya. Well, actually, they don't want to get towards sustainable soya. They want sustainable soya, and they want it now. But if you think about the challenges in getting farmers on a couple of continents and the whole supply chain to change overnight, it's clearly unrealistic. And that's why I'd like to publicly welcome what has been happening within FEFAC. FEFAC, of course, is the European Animal Feed Manufacturers Trade Association, where FEFAC have been looking for a mass market solution. and they've gone down the route of benchmarking existing programs, which I'm pleased to say that FEMAS is one. So rather than reinventing the wheel, they're taking and validating what is currently out there. And that, of course, ensures a continuity of supply as we move towards the general direction that retailers and food processors want us to move. Ruth Tysons and Alexander Doering are both here in the audience today, President and Director General of FEFAC respectively, and I know they'd be very interested to hear your views. And not only have we had people in FEFAC involved in this, but Nick Major has taken a major role here in the UK on that as well. Okay, so the next topic is also a key feed ingredient. I think everybody was surprised when the Commission came out with the proposal for nationalisation of GM. We found ourselves with some strange bedfellows on this, that a lot of the green groups, of course, are equally opposed to this concept. And maybe we might want to bring this out in the discussion period, but we've not been surprised by the fact that David Cameron's government have been more than slightly attracted to the concept of a national decision rather than an EU decision. You can make parallels with what, for example, he might wish to have on migration of labour, etc. And it's when those sort of politics complicate fairly straightforward decisions that it really does get quite difficult. Another big topic is that on the climate change levy, it's one of those things that's often below the radar. But if you look at the fact that there could be six-figure sums at stake for members if the current discounts are no longer allowed, you'll realise that this is a very important topic. And they say if you're going to get yourself an ally, get yourself a powerful ally. And I'm delighted to say that Jane Salter has been very much the architect of a strategy where we stand shoulder to shoulder with the food and drink industry on this particular issue. I'm now going to switch gears and talk about crop protection. And the first topic in this area is I want to talk about defending endocrine disruptors and the fact that there are 17 active ingredients at risk here. Excuse me a minute, I just need to take a sip of water. Ladies and gentlemen, this was drawn from the tap at the east of England this morning as a result of women taking the birth control pill in this country. There are estrogens in the drinking water, albeit very, very, very low levels. Nevertheless, this is an endocrine disruptor. So we have to be careful about people that peddle a political message without putting it into some sort of sensible context. I also want to briefly talk about metaldehyde. It's a familiar topic to those of you on the arable side. Metaldehyde is one of but 2 active ingredients left for the control of slugs. Those of you who are agronomists or have been agronomists will know that producing winter crops and specialist crops, if you can't control slugs, is very nearly impossible. So the loss of this active ingredient would have profound effects, not just on the crop protection sector, but across the whole of the arable sectors, and therefore ultimately into the feed sector as well. Time precludes me from talking a great deal about Healthy Harvest, other than to say that this was a cooperative venture with the NFU and the Crop Protection Association. The numbers in the purple block were generated by Anderson's, and I think that they tell a very clear and a very chilling story about the consequences of loss of active ingredients. That's been a very successful campaign within the UK, and that the Healthy Harvest was then taken to Europe, And this is a picture taken at the European launch in the romantic offices of Copa Cogeca in Brussels. The whole way in which crop protection products have been evaluated over the last several decades was always on the basis of risk, assessment of risk and managing the risk. And that all changed some 4 years or so ago when the Sustainable Use Directive came in. And this almost came in under the radar of a lot of people. But essentially, the system of evaluation switched from risk to hazard. Let me explain the difference between the two and the importance of going back to a risk-based analysis rather than a hazard situation. This is a photo of a petrol fire. Petrol, as we all know, is highly inflammable. It's explosive in confined spaces, and it's something that you definitely don't want to mess with. But we found a way to manage the risk. And therefore, because we can manage the risk, millions of cars across Europe's roads are very happily powered by petrol. So therefore, if we can manage it for petrol, why can't we manage it for crop protection? Because after all, we have the skilled people in the field that are capable of handling, managing that risk and giving advice to farmers on the same topic. The whole concept about the amount of skills and advice out on the farm is something that we talk about regularly, and every time the personnel change in DEFRA, the clock goes back to zero and we have to start all over again. I already showed you the figures for Feed Advisor Register and BASIS, and it's exactly the same for FACTS, with over 2,000 qualified advisors out there giving high quality advice. And in terms of what can be achieved, not just in terms of the narrow concept of the products that are being used, but look at the success that the Campaign for the Farmed Environment has achieved. 9,760 skylark plots, almost 7,500 kilometres of watercourses being fenced so that grazing livestock doesn't poach the ground and soil goes into the water. Really, really significant improvements that very, very rarely get talked about and recognised. Of course, advice on the ground is really important, but what you also need is the information to back that up. And I want to talk briefly about a thing which is called RB209, well known to many of you as basically the fertiliser Bible. Now, when DEFRA announced a couple of years ago that they were no longer going to fund this, we were in danger of the industry of fertiliser recommendations being frozen in time because nobody was there to adapt them and keep them up to date. And in a very ambitious and I think groundbreaking partnership, AHDB have really stepped up to this and have been the catalyst along with AIC in terms of making certain that fertiliser recommendations are bang up to date and that in real time almost we have the correct recommendations out there. If you think that's no big deal, let me remind you that it took 3 years last time round for RB209 to agree the fertiliser recommendations for main crop potatoes. 3 years. I also want to stay with fertiliser for a minute and talk about a great success story, but also to issue a warning. In terms of ammonia production, the fertiliser industry has halved the amount of CO2 produced in the past decade. But the warning is that we're beginning to approach the theoretical limit of that. You can see the 2015 figure only just above the theoretical limit. But the rather chilling thought is that by 2030, we are challenged to go to a situation where, frankly, at the moment, we have no idea how we're going to achieve that. And the question is, why do we need to achieve that? Because if you look at the amount of gigajoules required to produce a ton of ammonia, the bubble chart there, the bubble is the size of the energy required. You can already see that the EU is a world leader here. And of course, being a world leader is great, but it also means that you're less competitive compared to other people who are a lower cost producer. And if I were to have put the figure for China, where their energy comes from coal, not only would you not see China on the map, you'd hardly see the rest of the world. It really is a question of saying, why do we need to go this far? And the whole topic of emissions trading within the EU is not only a massive threat to food security, it's also a self-inflicted wound. And I think there really needs to be some intelligent debate, not about how we're going to do it, but also why we need to do it. Just staying with fertiliser for another moment or two, storage of ammonium nitrate came into strong focus with the explosion at West some 3 years ago. And there was a danger of a knee-jerk reaction to that, of HSE pressing for tougher standards in terms of storage limits for AN. And we've worked really hard and diligently with HSE on this. And as a result of that, the status quo is preserved. And ladies and gentlemen, so much of what we do is a work programme, a campaign, a victory, but actually the result is nothing changes. But the alternative, had we not fought the battle, things would have got worse. Switching gears now to arable marketing. We're currently trialling the electronic passport for grain. Not universally popular with members, but I think most people realise that paper eventually does always give way to more effective means of communication. And seeing the smartphone on that slide prompts me to say that today is the launch of the AIC app. And if you'd like to download that, my colleagues over at the AIC booth in the Peterborough Suite would be delighted to assist you to do that. Now here's another of these horrible acronyms, MiFID, Markets in Financial Instruments Directive. You notice I actually had to read the screen on that because it doesn't trip off the tongue. What it actually means is that there was a great danger that forward contracts would be perceived as financial instruments. And of course, we all know that the amount of red tape and legislation that's bound up in if you're giving financial advice. And this is a great example of teamwork by the European Trade Association, COSRAL, of whom Gloria Gabellini is with us today. She was very instrumental in getting the right people in Brussels to listen to the issue. Also some great teamwork from the UK, from the Arable Marketing Committee, and David Shepherd took a personal interest and got involved in a number of the meetings on that. And I think we're getting to a situation where we are going to be okay on this. And the so what question on this is that everybody from the Secretary of State downwards is banging on about farmers and risk management. Imagine how unfortunate it would have been if risk management had to take place without a key tool in the toolbox, such as grain futures. I'm now moving into seed, talking about seed treatments. Of course, 2015 saw the emergency authorization of the use of neonicotinoid seed dressings. It was in 4 counties. There was enough product to treat about 30,000 hectares. I have to say, and ladies and gentlemen, this is a theme that runs through just about everything we do. almost everything is done in cooperation with like-minded organisations. And of course, the NFU, the Crop Protection Association, the manufacturers and ourselves have all worked long and hard to get this sort of result. And just to update you, AIC has been accepted as an intervener in the 2 court cases where Bayer and Syngenta are challenging the European Commission. And once again, this is not a single sector issue, because the nub of our argument is to say that the Commission did not follow its own procedures, did not follow its own policies. It allowed politics to get in the way of this. Of course, this is to do with neonics, but it's a much more important concept of saying to the Commission, you have to keep politics separate from the science. It would take me an hour to talk about AIC services, and that's obviously not appropriate today, but I want to talk about 3 or 4 issues. In particular, UFAS has now, of course, got earned recognition. There's a picture of John Kelly signing the deal. That is now producing annual savings of around £2 million by taking out duplication of work. And the drive for simplification is always there. UFAS's compound and merchant standard has 30% fewer pages than previous editions, and we have to keep driving to have schemes that are fit for purpose and yet are as light as they possibly can be in terms of red tape and unnecessary detail. With earned recognition, we have a similar thing with FIAS, with Fertiliser Industry Assurance Scheme, where Department for Transport now recognise that FIAS has an important part to play in terms of validation and verification. And TASC and UFAS finally got Renewable Energy Directive compliance after, goodness me, a lot of burning of the midnight oil. So that is a very brief look at what happens within the sectors. I'm going to spend literally a couple of minutes now talking about things that have changed in the last year. We've had an election. We've now got a government that is committed to producing a 25-year plan for food and farming, at the same time as they're cutting DEFRA's budget by 30%. This is going to mean inevitably that things like the Campaign for the Farmed Environment are going to lose their funding. And I hope you saw in a couple of slides earlier that this campaign has really produced tangible changes on the farm. We've noticed a change in AHDB, rejuvenated under the leadership of Sir Peter Kendall, and very much now fit for purpose with new direction. We also had an opportunity for a slot on the podium at the Oxford Farming Conference, first time in about 40 years, so I understand. Previously they've been happy to take our members' money but not give them a voice. Well, that got changed this year. And also I'd like briefly to observe the fact that our overall relationship with Scottish Government, thanks to the team at AIC Scotland, is good and is getting better all the time. I said I'd talk about lobbying, and I just want to take 1 or 2 highlights of this. The main thrust of the year has been the launch of Food Supply in the Balance, and there's a picture of John Duffy summarising the presentation deep down in the bowels of the House of Commons this spring. This is a critically important report. It's also as valid in other member states as it is in the UK, and therefore we've been working with our European trade associations, the logos of which are on the left side of the screen there, to encourage other countries to use our methodology and plug their own data in, and sure as eggs are eggs, they will find that they too are running into longer term problems in terms of food supply. We've also done some direct lobbying on this ourselves. through the good offices of Alexander Doering, who was chairing the European Food Chain Coalition. I was able to talk at the Expo Milan meeting organised by Food and Drink Europe. That was a significant meeting because there was also a speaker, a certain Mr. Phil Hogan. And my final slide shows, you'll recognise Commissioner Hogan in the middle. My colleague Paul Rook is on the left. Paul, in addition to running a couple of sectors and governmental policy at AIC, in his part-time evenings and weekends, he's the president of CELCA, and it was through CELCA's good offices that we had an opportunity to interface with Commissioner Hogan. They say if you're going to go lobbying, you start at the top. And I'm both pleased and proud to be able to say that your trade association has now had an opportunity to speak at the very top. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for being so patient, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.